What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for Game Week 14. So I'm going to go through some of the popular players being moved in and out of people's squads and discuss whether they are good moves or not. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And make sure to join the Let's Talk FPL Premier League Pick'em League over on Sleeper. Completely free to join. You can download using the link in the description below. Prizes on offer and more on that to come later. So let's start with Alexander Isak, a frustrating one for Owen as he blanks against West Ham, then picks up an injury early against Crystal Palace and has to go off. And that's caused over 200,000 FPL managers to already have sold him. At the moment, all we know is that it was a contact injury, not a muscle injury. So in terms of being out for a while, that seems unlikely. And there is a chance that he could be back for Liverpool, but we don't know the timeline, because Eddie Howe hasn't told us yet. Now, the good news is if you're an Isak owner, Newcastle are playing on Wednesday and the deadline is on Tuesday. So Eddie Howe will hold a press conference by Tuesday at the latest. The only issue is he doesn't always give us good news about players, right? He can sometimes leave it up in the air. He's not quite as bad as Mikel Arteta, but he's not far off. I think if I was an Isak owner, I'd be doing what I could to hold on to him, especially if you've got a decent 8th attacker that you can play instead or have to come off the bench if Isak doesn't play. I'd lean more towards keeping him in my squad rather than selling him, because although Liverpool at home isn't a great fixture, you've then got Brentford away, Leicester at home, Ipswich away, Villa at home, which all look pretty good. Now, in that time, if Callum Wilson can build up his fitness, possibly the minutes for Isak will come down a little bit. But ultimately, I think he's more often than not going to be the first choice number 9 in that Newcastle team. And I believe, and I could be wrong here, Callum Wilson got hardly any minutes against Palace. I want to say, yeah, okay, he didn't get 0, but he got 15 after only getting 22 against West Ham. Considering Isak went off when he did, 15 minutes shows that Wilson's got a long way to go until he's fully fit. So I don't think it's a big worry. If Eddie Howe rules him out of the Liverpool game, but he could be back for Brentford, I'd still maybe lean towards keeping if your squad can deal with it this week, because I think he's such a good option between 15 and 18. It's not like there's no other forward you can go and buy. There's actually a ton right now. So I don't think Isak is essential to keep, but I also like the idea of not having to use a transfer to get rid of him. If you're going to sell him, I think most people, to be honest with you, are just going to go to Nicholas Jackson. He scored again against Aston Villa. That is now 8 goals, I think, this season, 4 assists. So in 13 starts, he got 12 attacking returns, and it's Southampton next. He is still on 4 yellow cards. He's got to get through Chelsea have to get through 19 games before that increases to 10 yellow cards for the threshold. So the chances are he will get suspended at some point. But I think a lot of people would just argue the fixture run is so good, I'll just take the yellow card when it comes and not worry about it. And I kind of get that, because if he doesn't get carded, Southampton away, Spurs away, Brentford home, Everton away is a pretty good fixture run. So I still think personally I would avoid Jackson. That's just the type of FPL manager that I am. But I wouldn't sit here and tell you that he's a bad option. Havertz is possibly an option, but I still like double defence and Saka. I don't think I'd want to block that off. Solanke was ill at the weekend. You're probably not buying him if you don't already own him. I think if you don't go from Isak to Jackson, the only other option around that price would be Ollie Watkins. I still don't like spending 9 million on him. And if he's ever going to get rotated out for Duran, it's possibly over these next 2 games. I think he'll start Brentford at home and Southampton at home, but he'll come off quite early in at least one of them. So I just think after that, Forest away, City at home, Newcastle away, on paper is not amazing. But the fixtures long term are very good. Like overall, from 14 to 25, for example, the Villa fixtures are pretty decent. He could be a long term hold, but 9 million in the context of all the other players that people are trying to fit in right now, I think it's a little bit expensive. Although I appreciate it's not that much more than Isak. And I can say the fixtures are okay till game week 25. You don't have to keep him that long. It could be a short term move for you, and then you get rid of him later. So I don't mind Ollie Watkins. Otherwise, if you're going cheap, I think you probably just buy João Pedro if you don't already have him. He's up to 5.8 million now, but the fixtures are great. His minutes will probably be pretty good. He might get benched one of the next 2 games. It's possible. He's not long back from injury. The matches are in quick succession. But overall, I think he could well start at least 4 in the next 5, and that might be enough for 5.8 million. One player that people have said I haven't talked about enough is Evan Nielsen. 3 assists at the weekend, all for penalties, which is kind of absurd. 4 goals though, 4 assists for the season, not bad. And pretty good fixtures, like Spurs at home wouldn't worry me all that much. Ipswich away, West Ham at home, United away, Palace at home. The fixture run for Bournemouth is pretty good. That's why we talked about Semenyo, in the last couple of weeks, about how he might be a pretty good player to keep hold of. So I don't mind Evan Nielsen either. I probably wouldn't be buying Strand Larsen right now. I just think you get about 3 or 4 game weeks, then he's got to go again. Cunha's probably not that bad still. And Raul Jimenez, you're just not buying because of the fixtures. So I think with Isak, if you're going to sell him, you either go to Jackson and take the risk on the yellow, or you go to Watkins if your squad can afford it, or you go to João Pedro, and if you don't have him, someone like Evan Nielsen instead. But I would lean, for most people's squads, towards trying to hold Isak, because 15 to 18 are pretty nice. So before I talk about the next player, quick reminder to join the Let's Talk FPL Premier League Pick'em League over on Sleeper. Sleeper is a completely free fantasy football app that you can download using the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen. And if you join my league and get your predictions in before Game Week 14, you've got a chance of winning a £100 Amazon gift voucher. So Premier League Pick'em is a really easy game to play. All you have to do is predict whether it's going to be a home win, an away win, or a draw for each game in the Premier League every game week. So I'm going to submit my predictions for Game Week 14 right now. I'm actually going to go for an Ipswich win against Crystal Palace, which I'm not completely sure about. But I think Ipswich have probably been a little bit better than the amount of points they've got so far. I'm also going to go for a Leicester win as well against West Ham. Everton versus Wolves is quite hard to call. Wolves attack pretty decent, but Everton defence not bad either. I'm going to go for another home win. I'm going to go for Liverpool to continue winning away to Newcastle as well. City versus Forest, as I keep saying, not the worst time to play Man City. But I think this is a run of good fixtures for them. I think they'll be back to winning ways. So I'm going to go for City. Chelsea to beat Southampton. Cole Palmer, my captain this week, to come in big. Arsenal, Man United. I'm going to have to go for a draw. I can't back against Man United, even though I think Arsenal are clearly very strong right now and better than Man United. I'm going to go for a draw somehow. Villa to beat Brentford. Fulham, Brighton is also very tough to call. 2 very good teams. I'm going to go for a draw. And then Bournemouth, Spurs. That could be another draw. I think both teams have got goals in them. Yeah, I'm going to go for a draw. So I've gone for 3 draws, which does seem very unlikely, but you never know. And 2 wins for newly promoted sides in Ipswich and Leicester. That's all you have to do. If at the end of the game week there's more than one person with the top amount of correct predictions, I'll do a draw on the next deadline stream to determine the winner. For Game Week 14, it's a £100 Amazon UK gift voucher up for grabs, completely free to play. Download Sleeper using the link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen. So if I'd asked you a few weeks ago who was going to be the top transferred in defender going into Game Week 14, I'm not sure too many people would have said Aaron Wan-Bissaka, but here we are, just over 130,000 transfers in this week, and that's caused his price to go from 4.4 to 4.5 million overnight, and he has done extremely well recently. If you look at the last 3 matches in particular, he got a 6-pointer against Arsenal with the goal. He got a 15-pointer against Newcastle, goal and clean sheet, and even got the clean sheet against Everton and went off in the 66th minute in that game, although they didn't concede either way after that. So it's 27 points in the last 3 matches, 9 points per game. That is great. Is that a reason to bring him in? I would pretty much say absolutely not. Like, I don't mind, to be fair, 3 of the next 5 fixtures. Leicester away, Wolves at home, Southampton away. There is a possibility of clean sheets in those games, although you'd prefer the Leicester and Southampton games to be at home. Bournemouth away in 16, Brighton at home in 17. I don't really rate for clean sheets against most teams, let alone West Ham. So there is potential there, but his attacking stats don't scream lots of attacking returns to come. 0.05 XG per 90, 0.06 expected assists. Like, it's fine, but it's nothing to write home about, and I just don't rate the West Ham defence whatsoever for clean sheets. And it's all well and good having the attacking potential, but the numbers don't really show that's going to continue, and West Ham definitely don't have the potential to go and get you lots of clean sheets. It's a bit like Aït-Nouri at Wolves, where he's hardly ever going to keep clean sheets, but his attacking numbers are at least a little bit better. Long term, after that Southampton game, you've got Liverpool at home, City away, not great. Fulham at home, Palace at home, Villa away, Chelsea away. I just don't see a huge amount of clean sheets. I would not buy Wan-Bissaka. And also, if you're in the market for a cheap defender, this is the kind of position you do not want to continually have to spend transfers on. You want to put someone in, just leave them for ages. And for that reason, I'd rather go for like Van Heck at Brighton, although his fixture this week is not great away to Fulham, but long term a little bit better, or Colwill at Chelsea. And I know that Chelsea have lost Fofana for a few weeks now, and that is going to dent their appeal a little bit. But in terms of their team strength, Chelsea and Brighton are going to be better than West Ham defensively. And apart from Spurs away in 15, Levi Colwill's got great fixtures like right up until 23, where he plays Man City away. But then after that, the fixtures are great for a long time. He's on 3 yellow cards, so he's still 2 away from a suspension. I just feel like he's the one to pick up this week, especially if you don't have to play him in game week 15. So Wan-Bissaka, you wiped out that triple clean sheet. I'll never forgive you for that, even though West Ham ended up scoring again anyway. But I just can't see any reason to bring him in this week. So one cheap defender that I am potentially interested in is Joe Gomez at 4.8 million. Now, I spoke about a lack of attacking threat with Wan-Bissaka. That is definitely the case with Joe Gomez as well. The guy has never scored for Liverpool, so far at least. Maybe it's coming this season. And in total, over his whole career, he's got 6 assists. So he's not someone I would expect a massive amount of attacking returns from. But the thing that he has over Wan-Bissaka is he plays for a much stronger team defensively. And I think when you look at the underlying numbers in terms of expected goals conceded for this season and previous seasons, we can probably put Liverpool as a top 2 defence in the league this year, along with Arsenal. I won't get into a discussion about who I think is the best defence. I just think they are the top 2. And 4.8 million is a potential bargain. You look over the next 6 game weeks, Newcastle away in 14, Spurs away in 17, probably tricky for a clean sheet. But Everton away in 15, Fulham at home in 16, Leicester at home in 18, and West Ham away in 19 all look pretty good. I think when you can get those clean sheets for 4.8 million rather than spending 6 million plus on Van Dijk Trent, that is extreme value territory. Now, I can't sit here and guarantee you that Joe Gomez is going to play every single match. We don't have enough data to go on, but a few things are clear. He's ahead of Kwanzaa in the pecking order for that centre-back role. And up until this point, every game Konate's been fit for in the league, he has started since game week 2. So Slot has not messed around with those positions too much. So hopefully, if you're looking to buy Gomez, it's just going to be Gomez and Van Dijk as long as they can both stay fit. I think the other thing that really increases Joe Gomez's minutes, up until January at least, is Bradley and I think it was Tsimikas were both spotted on crutches. And the rumour going around is, although we don't have a timeline yet, that Bradley's going to be out until January. Now, that's only like 4 weeks away, but game week 20 for Liverpool is the 5th of January. So the chances are he'll still be missing at that point. So you've got Bradley out, Konate out. There's not a huge amount of players to play in these roles. Tsimikas is also out. So Robertson, left back, looks pretty much guaranteed at 5.9 million. Van Dijk, Gomez to play centre-back, and then Trent to play right back. The only competition for Gomez right now is Kwanzaa, but the reason I think his minutes are going to be so good is because Trent is only just back from a hamstring issue. So I don't think he can just come back in, start against City, and then play 90 against Newcastle, 90 against Everton. It's just not going to happen. So someone has to cover his role, and that was Kwanzaa against Man City, and could be Kwanzaa or Gomez from the start. So what I mean is, right, let's just say Trent can't play these next 3 games, all of them. Let's say he has to be benched for one, then we could even see Kwanzaa or Gomez start right back, and then the other one play centre back. Either way, I can't see Gomez missing too many games. He might miss the odd one, right? That could happen, but the fixtures are so good that he also might. The fixtures are so good that he might still be worth it for that risk. Again, I'll stick by what I said with Wan-Bissaka. This is a position where you probably don't want to mess around with it too much. But if you're sat there where your other 3 or 4 defenders look great, and apart from injuries or suspensions, you're not going to have to sell them, taking one risk with a player like Gomez is probably fine. And if Konate ends up being out longer, like let's say he misses the whole of January in the end because he's just not going to be back as quickly, or he gets a setback, the fixtures are really good. Like Man United at home, Forest away, Brentford away, Ipswich at home. For a top 2 defence, that is not bad. So I think there's every reason to take that risk. I think when you look at players like Gomez, sometimes you're worried about blocking a Liverpool spot. I just don't see an issue, right? Salah, absolutely. One of Van Dijk or Trent, absolutely. That third spot is unlikely to be used, right? Like Diaz, Gakpo, like Jota's not back yet, but Diaz, Gakpo, Darwin Nunez, there's still rotation concerns. And also the problem with those players right now, especially Diaz and especially Luis Diaz, is he's a midfielder, right? So even if he was going to play all these games, where do people even fit him in? If you're trying to get Salah, Palmer, Saka, and then 2 other midfielders, you probably haven't got the money to spend on a Diaz. So I think Gomez is not going to block a Liverpool spot anytime soon. There's potential value there. I'm maybe tempted to go there myself next week. I don't think there's a huge rush to get Liverpool defenders for Newcastle away. I just know he's going to be a transfer down the line, but it might be so far away that it's not really a big issue. I think he's good value. I think there's plenty of clean sheets to come for Liverpool. It's just that attacking threat. It's just not really there. Let's talk about Bruno Fernandes next. Just over 75,000 transfers out this week, despite him picking up another 2 assists against Everton in game week 13. And that now brings him to 6 attacking returns in the last 4 game weeks. So since game week 10, 2 goals, 4 assists. So pretty nice, but people are still thinking about selling him. I think Fernandes is really simple. If you're using that spot to go to like Cole Palmer, Salah, Saka, one of those premium midfielders, I would do it, right? Fernandes is still a really good long-term option, but he's not better than those premium midfielders. And if you need that slot and you need Fernandes' money to make that move, absolutely, I would definitely do that, especially with Arsenal away in game week 14. It's not a great fixture. If you're selling him to pretty much anyone else, I'm not convinced that's worth it. Because long-term, I still quite like the fixtures. Arsenal away in 14, difficult. And City away in 16 on paper is not great, although now is not the worst time to play Man City. Outside of that, the fixtures are pretty good. Forest at home in 15, Bournemouth at home in 17, Wolves away in 18, Newcastle at home in 19. And then after that, you got Liverpool away in 20, which is not great. But then straight away at Southampton at home in 21. So you have got Arsenal, City and Liverpool all away between now and game week 20. But Liverpool's not until game week 20, and City away is probably not a completely terrible fixture. And in Fernandes, you got a player that was back into that role behind the number 9 against Everton. And long term, I think that is where he will play under Amorim. You might see him play as a 6/8 at times, but I think he'll mostly play more advanced. He's absolutely nailed on. He's still got your penalties. Yes, he came off in the 65th minute against Everton, but I think that was mostly because Man United were comfortable. I think it was 3-0 at the time he came off, so I don't think it's a concern. I know he was pictured with ice on his foot or something like that. Again, not a concern. Footballers have got ice on various body parts quite often after matches. I'm sure he'll be in that team against Arsenal. So if you're selling him to Saka, Palmer, Salah, absolutely fine. If you're sat there with one transfer and you're looking at Arsenal away thinking, I'm just going to get Bowen in or Mitoma or whoever it might be, I just don't see it as worth it. I'd rather keep Fernandes. I'd rather roll the transfer and reassess in game week 15, because chances are you'll get to game week 15, you'll have an extra transfer, and you'll just want to keep him for Forest at home. So Madueke was benched for Chelsea yesterday against Aston Villa, the first time he's been benched since game week 1. So generally his minutes and starts have been pretty good, but that is a bit of a concern moving forward. Now I think Madueke, a bit like Bruno Fernandes, is fairly simple. If you don't own him, you're not bringing him in. Even though it's Southampton away, there's just no point to use a transfer on someone long-term you can't be sure is going to start every week. I think with Sancho, Neto, etc., they just have plenty of options for those wide spots. If you're someone that owns him, yes, the fact that he was benched is not great, but that means there's a very good chance that he will start against Southampton away, and that is a really nice fixture. So I would probably be leaning more towards holding on to him. As always, there's going to be fringe cases out there where people have got squads where it makes sense to move Madueke on. But I think for most people that own him, I would just play him against Southampton, hope to get a good few points, and then long-term look to move him on. The Chelsea fixture run is pretty good, by the way. It's Spurs away in 15, followed by Brentford at home, Everton away, Fulham at home, and Ipswich away. Usually, I would say just keep a player for all those games. And Madueke may well start like 4 or 5 of them, but I think that benching against Aston Villa would probably put me off, because there's more matches coming up where there's a quick turnaround between games, and we've seen that Maresca is happy to rotate those spots. I think for Chelsea, and I've been saying this for weeks now, Palmer and Jackson, they are the only 2 attackers I would consider. Not Neto, not Sancho, not Madueke, not Enzo Fernandez. There's just too many rotation concerns with them. But if I was a Madueke owner, I'd want to give him the Southampton game, because that could have plenty of points in it. So no midfielder has had more transfers out than Brian Mbeumo this week, just over 350,000 and counting after yet another blank. And it's now just 1 assist in the last 4 games. So he got that against Bournemouth in Game Week 11. Outside of that, he's blanked against Fulham away, Everton away, and Leicester at home. And the concerning thing is, he's only got 0.09 XG in total over those 4 games. That's not per 90 minutes, that's total. And his stats from last year are also down on this year as well. So it is a bit of a concern moving forward. I understand why people want to sell him. I think it's a bit of a similar situation to Bruno Fernandes for me. If you're using that Mbeumo spot for a Palmer or a Saka, you should absolutely do it. Right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you should keep Mbeumo instead of buying one of those players because they're great. But I'm not sure there's a massive need to sell him outside of that. Basically, I don't think the amount of chat about selling him matches how much of a problem he is. I think there's way too much hype about having to get rid of him, basically. It is a concern, the numbers so far, that they're down on last year, the last 4 matches. Doesn't mean it will continue forever. I also don't really buy into this narrative that he's just poor away from home, because some of the away games Brentford have had, Liverpool away, City away, Spurs away, Man United away, you wouldn't necessarily expect a huge amount of returns in them anyway, right? Yes, they've also played Fulham and Everton, but that's just 2 of the 6 matches they've had away from home. So I don't see that away form as a problem. I don't think Aston Villa is necessarily a tough fixture. I mean, away is not easy, right? But it's not an awful fixture. Newcastle at home is okay. Chelsea away a bit more difficult. Forest at home, not bad. I think the next 4 fixtures are fine, or at least they're good enough to not feel a need to get rid of him from your team at absolutely all costs. I think basically Mbeumo out is a luxury transfer. Either you're going to a premium midfielder, absolutely fair enough, or you're sat there with like 3 or 4 transfers, in which case absolutely deal with Mbeumo. But if you're sat there with 1 transfer and nothing else to do, I would much rather roll into Game Week 15 than sell Mbeumo. I just don't think he's that much of a problem, right? Yes, the numbers are bad, but that could change, right? It's possible that they could go back up to what we've seen in previous seasons. We do have years of data to tell us that Mbeumo is a better player than he's showing right now. Also, what I find interesting is one of the players that people are thinking about going to is Jared Bowen. Now, don't get me wrong, the fixtures are better coming up for West Ham than Brentford. And if you do have the luxury of doing Mbeumo to Bowen, and that's what you want to do, you absolutely should, right? But if you look at Bowen's XG over the last 4 games, it's like 0.41 total over 4 games. That ain't that great either. Now, to be fair, Forest away, Everton at home, Newcastle away, Arsenal at home is trickier than what Mbeumo's had. But he's not done amazingly well. Those numbers probably will improve with the fixtures they've got coming up, but it does feel like a luxury move. So I don't mind going to Bowen from Mbeumo, but I'd still rather roll the transfer in most cases. Mitoma's another one who I quite like, and he's done really well recently. He mostly plays 90 minutes pretty much every game. The fixtures are very good as well. I really don't mind that. I think if you want to go to Mitoma or Bowen, that makes some sense. But I just wouldn't sit there and feel like Mbeumo is this huge problem you've got to deal with. If you've got other problems in your team, injury, suspensions, whatever it might be, just deal with them first. Just leave Mbeumo. Players don't return every single game week anyway. If he does blank another couple of times over the next 4 or 5 weeks, it's probably not the end of the world. So please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you have to keep him. I just don't think the hype around selling him matches how big of a problem he is for people. Let's talk about Morgan Rogers next. Another midfielder with a lack of returns recently. I think it's just 1 goal in his last 5 game weeks with no assists. Yeah, so since game week 9, the only return he's had is against Spurs away in game week 10 when they lost 4-1. He scored the only goal and got a 9-pointer. Outside of that, 1 point against Bournemouth, 1 point against Liverpool, 2 against Palace, and then 2 against Chelsea as well. On the yellow card situation, he's only on 3. So he's still 2 away from a suspension, so nothing to be concerned about there. I think the theme of this video can basically be that player is reasonable to sell, but there's also probably not a panic. And that's how I feel about Morgan Rogers, and I've got him in my own team. Most people picked him up pretty cheap. He's still priced at just 5.3 million. He is what he is, right? An enabler, an 8th attacker. that hopefully you don't have to play too often, but can cover when needed. His minutes have come down from earlier on in the season. So first 5 game weeks, he played 90 minutes every single week. Since game week 6, he's only done that twice, but he's still starting regularly. 13 out of 13 starts. And also the next 2 fixtures are not that bad. Brentford at home and Southampton at home. Personally, I'm probably going to start him in at least one of them, maybe even both games, and then put him back on the bench after that. And that's what I see him as in my FPL squad. Again, if you've got the luxury of moving him to like a Semenyo or a Mitoma because you've got enough cash and you don't need that for other moves, that's absolutely fair enough. But I would just be... This is something that's playing on my mind because I've got 2.6 million in the bank. I may not use it for any other move right now. I could just get Rodgers to Mitoma and that would feel quite nice. It would give me a bit of a benching headache most weeks, but also it gives me really nice cover over Christmas. So I am considering it. The one thing that slightly puts me off is spreading money around in too many positions. Like, I know from past experience that having that cheap 8th attacker usually is quite nice because your money is spent elsewhere. And then when you need to make a big move like Salah back to Haaland, which right now feels inconceivable, but at some point you might want to do that. It's just easier to do it when some of the positions are less valued, right? So like having Greaves as a 4 million defender, having Rodgers as a 5 million midfielder, and not having more money in those positions means it's easier to make those big moves. So would I rather have Mitoma? Of course I would. But I quite like the idea of just having not much money spent in that spot. And he is just an enabler. Most weeks you're not using him anyway. Side note, by the way, because I'm an idiot and I look way too far ahead, when Bruno Fernandes has Liverpool away in 20, if you were to keep him for all these better games and you still want him for Southampton in 21, I think Rodgers has Leicester at home that week. Yeah, in game week 20. So Morgan Rodgers can even cover Bruno Fernandes. When Fernandes has got Arsenal away, he's got Brentford at home. So if you really didn't want to play Fernandes in those tougher fixtures, Rodgers does cover quite nicely. So again, perfectly reasonable to sell, but I do like just having a cheap attacker without too much money wrapped up so that it's better spent elsewhere in the players that I'm going to play more often. And also, by the way, Rodgers' numbers this year are not bad, like 0.24 expected goals per 90, 0.13 expected assists. For a 5 million-ish midfielder, that is fine. Like, could he get benched in one of the next 2 games? I guess it's possible. But his minutes have been very good, and we've got no reason to believe that's going to go down anytime soon. So I would probably keep Rodgers in most situations. I don't even think he's that bad of a buy. Like, if you wanted to do, like in Mbeumo, Fernandes to Saka, Rodgers, I mean, that's fine. I think Rodgers is still pretty good. I'll leave it there. Make sure to give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Join the Let's Talk FPL Pick'em League over on Sleeper as well, using the link in the description below. Get signed up and get your predictions in before game week before game week 14, because the winner will get a £100 Amazon gift voucher for that week only, and I'll be doing more prizes throughout the season as well. I'll be back probably later on today with my team selection video. I'll have final thoughts tomorrow, and then a deadline stream starting at 4 PM UK time. So make sure to tune in for all of that. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and I'll catch you again soon. Thanks for watching.